The rain falls on Paris tonight, as it has fallen for 7 centuries. Somewhere in the Marais district, water runs down stone walls that were already ancient when Napoleon marched to Moscow. These walls remember things. They remember a man named Nicolas Flamel who lived in a house on Rue de Montmorency in 1407. They remember that he claimed to possess the philosopher's stone. They remember that he died. Or did he? In the grand halls of Versailles, courtiers once whispered about a man who never aged. The Count of Saint-Germain attended royal gatherings across 8 decades without gaining a single grey hair. He spoke of events from centuries past as if he had witnessed them personally. He claimed to be 500 years old, and when witnesses challenged his impossible age, he simply smiled and changed the subject. In the depths beneath Notre Dame, in chambers that tourists never see, symbols are carved into stone. Alchemical formulas, instructions for transmutation, recipes for the elixir of life. These are not decorations. These are working documents. Someone carved them there, believing they held the secret to eternal existence. Tonight, we journey through France's darkest obsession, the quest for immortality, the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. The men and women who believed death was optional, who spent fortunes seeking the philosopher's stone, who performed rituals in midnight chambers, who claimed success in achieving what nature says is impossible. These are not fairy tales. These are documented historical figures. Nicolas Flamel was real. His house still stands in Paris. The Count of Saint-Germain attended verified royal events across Europe. Gilles de Rais commanded armies for Joan of Arc before his crimes were discovered. Catherine de Medici ruled France and consulted with magicians. Fulcanelli published books in the 1920s and then vanished without trace. Real people, real obsessions, real darkness. But before we descend into the laboratories where alchemists worked with mercury and sulfur, before we enter the chambers where aristocrats drank elixirs they believed would grant eternal youth, before we examine the rituals that promised immortality at terrible cost, I must ask you something. Have you subscribed to this channel? Because what we explore tonight goes deeper than any documentary you've encountered. We don't simply recount legends. We examine primary sources. We read the alchemists' own writings. We trace their lives through historical records. We document what they claimed, what they did, and what happened to them. If you value investigations into history's darkest corners, into the obsessions that drove brilliant minds to madness, into the boundary where science becomes magic and ambition becomes horror, then subscribe now. Click that button. Because this channel ventures regularly into territories that mainstream history prefers to ignore, and leave a comment telling us, if you could live forever, would you? Would you drink an elixir of unknown ingredients if someone you trusted promised it would grant you centuries of life? Would you perform rituals in midnight chambers if ancient texts claimed they would make you immortal? Think carefully, because the people we discuss tonight faced these exact questions, and their answers shaped European history in ways we're still discovering. As you watch tonight, ask yourself, why does humanity fear death so intensely that brilliant minds dedicate their lives to defeating it? Why did alchemists believe that base metals could become gold, that poisonous mercury could become medicine, that death itself could be reversed through chemistry and will? What drove these obsessions? And more disturbingly, what if some of them succeeded? France has been the center of Western alchemy for 1,000 years. From medieval Paris to Renaissance courts, to Belle Epoque laboratories, the quest for the philosopher's stone has consumed France's greatest minds. Some died in poverty, their laboratories filled with failed experiments. Some gained vast wealth through means they never adequately explained. Some vanished, leaving behind only their writings and rumors of immortality achieved. Their laboratories still exist. Their books are preserved in French national libraries. Their symbols mark buildings across Paris. Their influence shaped chemistry, medicine, and the entire scientific method, because alchemy was not mere superstition. It was the grandfather of modern science. And its practitioners were not fools. They were the most educated men and women of their eras, applying the best knowledge available to the most fundamental human question: must we die? I am Mr. Ravenhurst, and tonight we discover that France's dark alchemists were not seeking gold. Gold was merely proof of concept. They were seeking something far more valuable, something that would make gold meaningless. They were seeking time itself, unlimited time, eternal life, and the price they paid for that pursuit was higher than any of them anticipated. Our journey begins in medieval Paris, in a house that still stands after 6 centuries, where a humble scribe became the most famous alchemist in history, where a mysterious book appeared containing secrets that would make its owner wealthier than kings, where Nicolas Flamel claimed to have achieved what every alchemist dreams of: the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, the transmutation of lead into gold, and the distillation of the elixir of life that grants immortality. The house is at 51 Rue de Montmorency. You can visit it. You can stand where Flamel worked. You can touch walls that witnessed what he claimed to accomplish, and you can decide for yourself whether the man who died in 1418 truly died at all, or whether he simply stopped appearing in public. Let us begin at the house that refuses to forget, where medieval stone holds memories of mercury vapors and sulfur smoke, where a man claimed to defeat death, where the quest for immortality consumed a soul, where Nicolas Flamel's legend was born, and where it has never truly died. Chapter 1. Nicolas Flamel, the scribe who conquered death. The oldest restaurant in Paris is not what you might expect. It's not in a grand building. It's not marked by elaborate signage. It's a narrow medieval house at 51 Rue de Montmorency in the Marais district, now operating as Auberge Nicolas Flamel. The building was constructed in 1407. That's 618 years ago. And it was built by a man who claimed to have discovered the secret of eternal life. Nicolas Flamel was born around 1330 in Pontoise, a small town northwest of Paris. His family was not wealthy. They were not aristocratic. Nicolas learned to read and write, which in 14th century France placed him among the educated minority, but he was no scholar. He became a scribe, a copyist, a man who made his living reproducing books by hand, letter by letter, page by page, in an era before printing presses. He moved to Paris in his 20s and established a shop near Saint-Jacques-la-Boucherie church. He married a woman named Parisian, a widow twice over who brought some property to the marriage. They lived modestly. Nicolas copied books. Parisian managed their household. This was their life. Unremarkable. Ordinary. The kind of life that history forgets. And then the book appeared. According to Flamel's own account, written late in his life, he had a dream. An angel appeared to him, holding a book covered in copper plates. The angel showed him the book and said, "Flamel, look at this book. You will understand nothing of it now, nor will anyone else. But one day, you will see in it something that no one else will see." Sometime later, Flamel claimed it was shortly after the dream, though the timeline is unclear. A stranger entered his shop. The man needed money. He offered to sell Nicolas a book, an old book, a strange book. 21 pages, each page made of copper bark instead of parchment, covered in symbols and text that Nicolas recognized as Hebrew. Though he could not read the language, Nicolas purchased the book for 2 florins, a modest sum. And when he examined it, he realized this was the book from his dream. The exact book the angel had prepared him for this moment. The book's title, as Flamel understood it, was The Book of Abraham the Jew, Prince, Priest, Levite, Astrologer and Philosopher. It claimed to teach the transmutation of metals, the creation of gold from base materials, the preparation of the elixir of life. All of this through processes called alchemy, derived from Arabic alchemia, the art of transformation. Flamel spent 21 years trying to understand the book, 21 years of studying Hebrew, of consulting with scholars, of traveling to Spain to meet with Jewish mystics who might interpret the symbols of experimenting in a laboratory he established in his house, of heating mercury and sulfur, of distilling substances, of following instructions he only partially understood, of failure after failure after failure. And then, according to his account, on January 17th, 1382, at exactly noon, Nicolas Flamel successfully transmuted 1/2 pound of mercury into silver. 3 months later, on April 25th, at 5 in the evening, he transmuted mercury into gold, pure gold. He had achieved the great work. He had discovered the secret of the Philosopher's Stone. He had become the most successful alchemist in history. The evidence for this claim is Flamel's sudden wealth. In the 1380s, Nicolas Flamel was a modestly successful scribe. By the 1400s, he was funding the construction of chapels, hospitals, and charitable foundations across Paris. He endowed 14 hospitals. He funded repairs to multiple churches, including Saint-Jacques-la-Boucherie, where he worshipped. He commissioned elaborate tombs for himself and Père. He built the house at 51 Rue de Montmorency as free housing for the poor. This level of philanthropy required substantial wealth. Where did it come from? Flamel claimed his alchemical transmutations had provided unlimited gold. Skeptics suggested he had made money through real estate speculation, or perhaps had inherited from wealthy patrons, or possibly made his fortune through less savory means that he preferred to hide behind alchemy legends. But the scale of Flamel's charity is difficult to explain through ordinary medieval business practices. He gave away more money than most merchants accumulated in lifetimes, and he continued giving until his death, or what was reported as his death. Nicolas Flamel died on March 22nd, 1418, at approximately 88 years old. He was buried beside Père, who had died before him, in a tomb he had commissioned at Saint-Innocent Cemetery. The tomb still exists, though it's now housed in the Musée de Cluny. You can see it. Read the inscriptions. Examine the alchemical symbols carved into stone. But here's what makes Flamel's story strange. After his death, rumors began immediately that he hadn't really died, that the burial was a deception, that he and Père had successfully created the elixir of life and had simply left Paris to live anonymously elsewhere. In 1761, over 300 years after his supposed death, reports circulated that Nicolas Flamel had been seen alive at the Paris Opera looking exactly as he had in paintings from the 15th century. The report was detailed. Multiple witnesses. Someone even claimed to have spoken with him, and that he acknowledged being the same Nicolas Flamel, but refused to explain how he had lived so long. In the early 19th century, a man named Paul Lucas, traveling in Turkey on behalf of the French government, reported meeting a dervish who claimed to know Nicolas Flamel personally. "I will tell you the truth," the dervish allegedly said. "Flamel is still living. Neither he nor his wife are dead. It is 3 years since I left them both in India. He is one of the 7 prophets who have been faithful to truth." These accounts are not verifiable. They're likely fabrications, but they demonstrate something important. Nicolas Flamel's legend refused to die even when the man himself had been buried for centuries. People wanted to believe that he had achieved immortality, that the Philosopher's Stone was real, that death could be defeated through knowledge and chemistry. The question is, what actually happened? Let's examine what we can verify. Nicolas Flamel existed. His house at 51 Rue de Montmorency still stands. His charitable foundations are documented in Parisian archives. His tomb exists in the Musée de Cluny. His death in 1418 is recorded in church registers, the Book of Abraham the Jew. No such book exists in any collection. If Flamel possessed it, he never preserved it or displayed it publicly. No other alchemist ever examined it. We have only Flamel's description, written decades after he claimed to have acquired it. The transmutations of 1382. Only Flamel claimed to have witnessed them. No independent verification exists. No samples of his gold were tested. No witnesses documented the process. We have his word, written in his own account, decades after the events supposedly occurred. His sudden wealth? Real. Documented. But the source remains genuinely unclear. Real estate speculation is the most likely explanation. Medieval Paris was growing rapidly. Someone who invested wisely in property could accumulate significant wealth. But this explanation is not definitive. We simply don't know where Flamel's money came from. Which brings us to the most important question. Did Flamel believe in his own alchemical success? Or was the entire story a convenient fiction to explain wealth gained through means he preferred to obscure? The answer may lie in what Flamel did with his money. He didn't hoard it. He didn't live extravagantly. He gave it away systematically, funding religious institutions and charitable foundations. He commissioned his tomb years before his death, covering it with alchemical symbols that he wanted preserved. He wrote his account, knowing it would be read by future generations. This suggests genuine belief. Whether his transmutations actually occurred or not, Nicolas Flamel believed he had achieved the great work. He believed he possessed the Philosopher's Stone. And perhaps he believed he had prepared the elixir of life, but chose not to drink it, preferring natural death to the burden of eternal existence. Or perhaps he drank it and simply left Paris, letting the world believe he was dead. The house at 51 Rue de Montmorency operates as a restaurant now. You can dine there. The building has been continuously occupied for over 600 years. The walls are the same walls Flamel knew. The rooms are the rooms where he worked. Staff report phenomena. Objects that move overnight. Cold spots that persist regardless of heating. The sense of being watched from empty doorways. Footsteps on floors above when the upper levels are vacant. The smell of sulfur and mercury that has no source. These reports are consistent. They've been documented by multiple owners across decades. Skeptics attribute them to old building quirks, to suggestion, to the power of legend creating psychological experiences. Believers suggest that Flamel's presence lingers in the house he built, that his work left impressions deeper than merely physical. What cannot be disputed is that Nicolas Flamel created a legend that has endured for 6 centuries. Whether that legend is based on accomplished transmutations, or clever deception, or genuine belief in processes that don't actually work, the result is the same. He is the most famous alchemist in history, the man whose name is synonymous with the Philosopher's Stone, the medieval scribe who claimed to conquer death. And across Paris, his symbols remain carved into churches he funded, engraved on buildings he endowed, present in manuscripts he copied, alchemical formulas, instructions for transmutation, recipes that claim to grant eternal life. Are they real? Can they work? Should anyone attempt them? Nicolas Flamel lived to 88 years old, which was exceptional longevity in medieval France. Whether he achieved this through alchemy or simply through luck and good health, we cannot determine. But his legend suggests something that alchemists across Europe came to believe: that the elixir of life was possible, that immortality could be achieved through chemistry, that death was not inevitable, but merely a problem requiring the correct solution. This belief would obsess France for centuries. It would drive men mad. It would consume fortunes. It would lead to discoveries that advanced science and to experiments that killed their practitioners. Because once you believe death is optional, once you think immortality is within reach, everything else becomes secondary. Gold? Gold is meaningless if you live forever. Power? Power fades across generations unless you yourself live to consolidate it. Love? Love becomes tragedy when one partner ages while the other remains eternally young. The philosopher's stone promised to solve the problem of death, but it created new problems that no alchemist fully considered until too late. We leave medieval Paris now, Nicolas Flamel's house standing in the rain as it has stood for 6 centuries. We travel forward in time to the court of Louis XV, to Versailles in its golden age, to an aristocrat who appeared from nowhere, who claimed to remember events from centuries past, who never aged across 8 decades of documented appearance, who died multiple times according to records yet continued attending royal events, who became the most mysterious figure in European history, the Count who never died, the man with no past and unlimited futures. Saint-Germain, where every answer creates more questions and where immortality becomes not legend, but documented impossibility. Chapter 2. The Count of Saint-Germain, the immortal aristocrat. In the winter of 1745, a man attended a reception at the court of Louis XV in Versailles. He was perhaps 45 years old in appearance. Dark hair without grey, a face unlined by age. He dressed impeccably in the latest fashion. He spoke French fluently, with an accent that suggested foreign origin, but which no one could place precisely. He seemed educated, cultured, knowledgeable about art, music, science, and history. His name, he said, was the Count of Saint-Germain. No one had heard of him before. No family records mentioned his title. No European court could verify his nobility. He simply appeared at Versailles in 1745. And when questioned about his background, he smiled pleasantly and changed the subject. But here's what makes the Count remarkable. For the next 40 years, he appeared consistently at royal courts across Europe, in France, in England, in Prussia, in Russia, always looking approximately the same age, always dressed perfectly, always knowledgeable, always charming, and always refusing to explain where he came from or how old he was. Multiple witnesses documented conversations with Saint-Germain where he spoke of historical events from centuries past, as if he had personally witnessed them, not as if he had read about them in books, as if he had been present. He described the court of François I in the early 1500s with such specific detail that listeners became uncomfortable. He discussed the wedding of Cana from the Bible as if he had attended it personally, catching himself and laughing when someone pointed out the chronological impossibility the Countess von Georgi wrote in her memoirs, that she encountered Saint-Germain at a reception in Venice in 1710 when she was a young woman. He appeared to be approximately 45 years old. 50 years later, in 1760, she met him again in Paris. He looked exactly the same. Not older, not grey. Completely unchanged. She confronted him about this. "You were already middle-aged when I met you 50 years ago," she said. "How is it possible you look the same?" Saint-Germain smiled. "Madame," he replied, "I am very old indeed." "How old?" she asked. "That," he said, "is a secret I cannot share." Casanova, the famous adventurer and writer, encountered Saint-Germain multiple times. In his memoirs, he described a conversation where Saint-Germain casually mentioned being 500 years old. Casanova thought he was joking, but Saint-Germain did not laugh. He did not wink. He simply changed the subject, leaving Casanova uncertain whether the claim was truth or theatrical affectation. Horace Walpole, the English writer, met Saint-Germain in London in 1745 and described him as an odd man who has been in every country and speaks every language he sings, plays on the violin wonderfully, composes, is mad, and not very sensible. But even Walpole, sceptical by nature, could not determine Saint-Germain's true age or origin. Jean-Jacques Rousseau met him. Voltaire wrote about him, calling him a man who never dies and who knows everything. Frederick the Great of Prussia hosted him. Catherine the Great of Russia consulted him. He moved through the highest levels of European aristocracy for decades, always welcome, always mysterious, always unchanged. What did Saint-Germain claim about himself? The accounts are fragmentary, but certain consistent elements emerge. He claimed to have achieved the alchemical great work that he possessed the Philosopher's Stone, that he had prepared the elixir of life and drank it regularly, which explained his apparently unaging appearance. He demonstrated seemingly impossible knowledge, languages that were ancient, historical events that predated living memory, alchemical processes that fascinated and frustrated those who tried to replicate them. He possessed significant wealth, though no one could determine its source. He gave expensive gifts. He funded alchemical laboratories. He paid for lavish apartments in multiple European capitals, yet he held no position that would provide income. No inheritance was documented. No business explained his money. He ate unusual food, always in private. Multiple witnesses reported that Saint-Germain never dined publicly. At banquets, he would sit and converse, but consume nothing. When pressed, he claimed he ate a special diet of oatmeal preparations that maintained his health and longevity. Whether this was truth or misdirection, no one ever saw him eat a normal meal. And here's the strangest part. Saint-Germain died multiple times, yet continued appearing. In 1760, he supposedly died in Amsterdam. Yet in 1762, he was documented in Russia, working as a military advisor during Catherine the Great's coup. In 1784, official records state that the Count of Saint-Germain died in Eckernförde, Germany, at the castle of Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel, who had been his patron. The death was witnessed. The burial was documented. The grave exists. Yet in 1785, Saint-Germain attended a Masonic conference in Wilhelmsbad. Multiple witnesses recorded his presence. He was recognized. He participated in discussions. He was not a ghost or a mistaken identity. He was there in 1789. During the French Revolution, multiple sources placed him in Paris, warning aristocrats to flee before the terror began. Marie Antoinette allegedly met with him. He supposedly told her specific details about the royal family's fate that came to pass exactly as he predicted. In 1820s, the Countess d'Adhémar published memoirs claiming she had encountered Saint-Germain regularly throughout the late 18th century, and that he had appeared to her as recently as 1815, looking no older than he had 50 years earlier. In 1867, French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin wrote that a man claiming to be Saint-Germain had approached him, demonstrating alchemical processes and claiming to be the same man who had attended Versailles over a century earlier. These accounts cannot all be true. Multiple explanations exist. 1. Saint-Germain was a charlatan who cultivated mystery for social advantage. He lied about his age. He invented his alchemical achievements. His unusual knowledge came from extensive reading, not personal experience. His apparent longevity was theatrical performance. Multiple men used the name Saint-Germain across decades, maintaining the illusion. 2. Saint-Germain was a spy or intelligence agent who used the mystique of alchemy to move freely between royal courts, gathering information for some government or organization whose identity remains unknown. His claims of immortality were cover for his actual work. 3. Saint-Germain genuinely believed he was immortal, possibly due to mental illness, and his charisma and intelligence allowed him to convince others of his delusion. He was not lying, but was genuinely deluded. 4. Saint-Germain had achieved something unusual, not literal immortality, but perhaps a medical process that slowed aging significantly. Perhaps his special diet had effects we don't understand. Perhaps he had discovered something about human longevity that remains lost. 5. The most improbable explanation, the one that logic rejects, but which the accounts seem to demand. Saint-Germain was exactly what he claimed to be, immortal, having drunk the elixir of life, living across centuries. And we simply must accept that sometimes history documents things that should be impossible. Modern researchers have investigated Saint-Germain extensively. They found evidence of a probable identity, the illegitimate son of Prince Francis II Rákóczi of Transylvania, born around 1690 to 1700. This would explain his refined manners, his education, his access to aristocratic circles, and his reluctance to discuss his parentage, which was scandalous. It would also mean that when Saint-Germain died in 1784, he was approximately 84 years old, not 500. Not immortal. Just elderly and fortunate to have maintained health and appearance better than most men his age. But this explanation struggles with the documented appearances after 1784. Unless multiple men adopted the identity, unless reports after his death were fabrications or mistakes, unless his fame created false sightings, we're left with uncomfortable questions. What we know with certainty: a man using the name Count of Saint-Germain moved through European aristocratic circles from approximately 1740 to 1784. He was intelligent, cultured, charismatic, and deliberately mysterious about his background and age. He claimed alchemical knowledge. He impressed multiple skeptical witnesses with seemingly impossible historical knowledge. He died in 1784, according to official records. What we cannot know: whether he genuinely believed himself immortal or was performing theatre, whether his alchemical knowledge was real or invented, whether appearances after his death were genuine or misidentifications, whether any of his claims about the philosopher's stone and elixir of life had basis in reality. But here's what we can observe. The legend of Saint-Germain has proven more durable than any ordinary man's reputation. Over 200 years after his documented death, people still report seeing him, still claim he continues to live, appearing in various places, never aging, always mysterious. The Theosophical Society, in the late 1800s, claimed Saint-Germain was one of their hidden masters, guiding humanity's spiritual development from behind the scenes. Modern occultists invoke his name in rituals. Books are published regularly presenting new theories about his identity and fate. Saint-Germain has become more than a historical figure. He has become an idea, the concept of the immortal adept, the man who conquered death through knowledge, the promise that human life need not end, that with the correct formula, the right elixir, the proper alchemical process, we might achieve what nature denies us. Whether this promise is true or false, comforting or tragic, gift or curse, the fact remains. Humans want it to be true. We want to believe that someone, somewhere, has defeated death, that immortality is possible, that Saint-Germain still walks among us, timeless, ageless, eternal. And perhaps that desire, that deep human longing to escape mortality, is what keeps his legend alive. Not evidence of his continued existence, but evidence of our continued need to believe that death is not inevitable, that we are not trapped by biology, that somewhere someone holds the secret that could make us immortal too. The castle in Eckernförde where Saint-Germain supposedly died has been demolished. The grave that was documented in 1784 cannot be located with certainty. No remains exist that can be tested. No possessions survived that might contain alchemical formulas. He left nothing concrete behind except stories, accounts from witnesses who are themselves long dead, and a mystery that refuses to be solved, which perhaps was exactly his intention: to live in legend if not in flesh, to achieve a kind of immortality not through alchemical elixirs, but through the immortality of fame, to be remembered centuries after death, discussed, debated, investigated, still capable of generating wonder and confusion. If that was his goal, then Saint-Germain succeeded absolutely. He is more alive in our collective imagination today than he ever was in historical reality. The Count, who never died, continues to live through our fascination with his impossibility. We leave Versailles now, its grand halls where Saint-Germain once charmed courtiers. We travel backward in time to the 1400s, to Brittany, to a castle where a French marshal who had fought beside Joan of Arc descended into darkness so complete that his name became synonymous with evil itself, where a nobleman's obsession with alchemy and forbidden knowledge led him to commit atrocities that shocked even medieval France, where the search for the philosopher's stone became confused with demonic rituals, where Gilles de Rais, war hero and monster, proved that the quest for power over death sometimes leads to the worst possible expressions of power over life. Chapter 3: Cagliostro, the alchemist who destroyed a queen. In the spring of 1785, the most spectacular scandal in French history began with a diamond necklace worth 1.6 million livres, more than the annual budget of the French Navy. At its center was a man who claimed to be 2,000 years old. His name was Count Alessandro di Cagliostro. Though that was not the name he was born with, he claimed to have witnessed the crucifixion of Christ. He claimed to have studied alchemy under the prophet Moses. He claimed to possess the elixir of life and to have drunk it regularly for centuries. He claimed many things, and for a brief, brilliant moment, much of European aristocracy believed him. His story begins not in the palaces of Versailles, but in the slums of Palermo, Sicily, in 1743, where a boy was born and named Giuseppe Balsamo. His family was poor. His father was a merchant who died when Giuseppe was young, leaving the family in poverty. Giuseppe grew up on the streets, learning quickly that survival required charm, intelligence, and the willingness to deceive. He was brilliant, genuinely brilliant. He could read people with uncanny accuracy. He learned languages easily. He absorbed knowledge from anyone who would teach him. He studied briefly in a monastery, learning Latin, chemistry, and medicine before the monks expelled him for reasons that remain unclear, but which probably involved theft or fraud. By his 20s, Giuseppe Balsamo had become a talented forger and con artist. He sold fake maps to treasure hunters. He convinced wealthy men that he could transmute lead into gold if they would only provide funding for equipment. He married Lorenza Feliziani, a beautiful young woman who became his partner in increasingly elaborate schemes. But Giuseppe Balsamo was too ambitious for mere street crime. He wanted something greater. He wanted to move in aristocratic circles. He wanted wealth and power and recognition. And he understood instinctively that in 18th century Europe, mysticism and alchemy opened doors that simple fraud could not. So Giuseppe Balsamo died metaphorically, and Count Alessandro di Cagliostro was born. The transformation was complete. Cagliostro dressed as an Oriental nobleman. He claimed to have been born in Malta to a noble family. He spoke of his travels in Egypt, in Arabia, in mysterious eastern lands where ancient wisdom survived. He demonstrated knowledge of alchemy, of medicine, of secret rituals that he claimed came from Egyptian sources predating Christianity. And Europe believed him, or wanted to believe him, or needed to believe him. Because the 1770s and 1780s were a time of desperate spiritual hunger among European aristocracy. The Enlightenment had undermined traditional religion without providing satisfying replacements. Aristocrats wanted mystery, wanted connection to ancient wisdom, wanted to believe that human limitations could be transcended through secret knowledge. Cagliostro provided exactly what they craved. He traveled through Europe, London, Paris, The Hague, St. Petersburg, Warsaw, establishing Masonic lodges based on what he called the Egyptian rite. These were not ordinary Masonic lodges. Cagliostro's Egyptian rite promised spiritual regeneration, physical healing, and ultimately the alchemical great work, the creation of the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. His rituals were elaborate. Participants dressed in Egyptian costume. Ceremonies invoked ancient gods. Cagliostro claimed to summon spirits, to communicate with the dead, to heal the sick through magnetism and alchemical medicines. And many of his healing worked. This is documented. Cagliostro successfully treated illnesses that conventional physicians could not cure. Whether through genuine medical knowledge he had acquired somehow, through early understanding of psychosomatic effects, or through sheer chance, his reputation as a healer grew. He charged nothing for medical treatment. This was crucial to his credibility. Charlatans take money. Cagliostro gave his services freely, accepting only donations to his Masonic lodges. This made him seem genuine, motivated not by greed but by authentic desire to help humanity. His wife, Lorenza, who now went by Serafina, served as his assistant, and as a medium in seances. She was beautiful, charismatic, and either genuinely believed in Cagliostro's powers, or was a superbly talented actress. Together, they convinced some of the most intelligent people in Europe that they possessed supernatural abilities. Cardinal de Rohan, Prince Bishop of Strasbourg, was one of those believers. Rohan was wealthy, powerful, and desperately wanted to regain favor with Queen Marie Antoinette, who despised him. He had insulted her years earlier when she was still an Austrian princess, and she had never forgiven him. Rohan's ecclesiastical career had stalled. He needed the Queen's approval to advance further. He was desperate. Into this desperation walked Jeanne de la Motte, a con artist who claimed descent from French royalty. She told Rohan that she was close friends with Marie Antoinette. She could arrange meetings. She could rehabilitate his reputation. She convinced Rohan to write letters to the Queen, which Jeanne claimed to deliver. She provided responses that she said came from Marie Antoinette. The responses were forgeries, but Rohan believed them. Jeanne worked with accomplices including her husband and a forger named Rétaux de Villette. Together, they constructed an elaborate deception. The Queen, they told Rohan, desperately wanted to purchase a diamond necklace, the most expensive piece of jewelry ever created, containing 647 diamonds in an elaborate design. But the king would not approve the purchase. Marie Antoinette needed someone to buy it on her behalf, secretly, someone she could trust. Cardinal de Rohan, eager to please the Queen, agreed he would purchase the necklace using his credit. The Queen would pay him back in installments. It was a service, a favor. Proof of his loyalty. The jewelers, Baume and Bassange, were thrilled. They had been trying to sell this necklace for years. They had created it originally for Madame du Barry, Louis XV's mistress, but he had died before purchasing it. They had offered it to Marie Antoinette multiple times, and she had always refused. She thought it was too expensive and ostentatious. But if Cardinal de Rohan was buying it, that was acceptable. They released the necklace to him on credit. Rohan gave the necklace to Jeanne de la Motte, believing she would deliver it to the Queen. Jeanne and her accomplices immediately broke up the necklace and sold the diamonds individually in London and Paris. They became suddenly, spectacularly wealthy, and they vanished. When the first payment came due, Cardinal de Rohan could not pay. The jewelers went to the Queen, expecting payment. Marie Antoinette had no idea what they were talking about. She had never requested the necklace, had never received it, had never had any communication with Cardinal de Rohan. The scandal exploded. The affair of the diamond necklace consumed France. It revealed that a cardinal had been duped by con artists into believing he was secretly serving the Queen. It made the monarchy look corrupt and stupid. It made Marie Antoinette look materialistic and deceitful, even though she was completely innocent. The public believed she had received the diamonds. They believed she had cheated the jewelers. They believed she was living in obscene luxury while France suffered. And where was Cagliostro in all this? He was peripherally involved. Cardinal de Rohan had consulted Cagliostro about whether to trust Jeanne de la Motte. Cagliostro had performed divination rituals and declared that Rohan would succeed in regaining the Queen's favour. This advice, given in good faith or as part of the con, was interpreted as Cagliostro's participation in the fraud. When arrests were made, Cagliostro was imprisoned in the Bastille, along with Cardinal de Rohan, Jeanne de la Motte, and the other conspirators. The trial was sensational. All of Paris followed it. The testimonies revealed layer upon layer of deception. Jeanne de la Motte had even hired a prostitute named Nicole Leguay d'Oliva to impersonate Marie Antoinette in a nighttime garden meeting with Rohan, convincing him that the Queen truly favoured him. The fraud was intricate, audacious, and ultimately successful in stealing 1.6 million livres worth of diamonds, but Cagliostro was acquitted. The court determined he had not been part of the conspiracy. He had merely given bad advice to a foolish cardinal. He was released from the Bastille and immediately expelled from France. King Louis XVI wanted nothing more to do with him. Cardinal de Rohan was also acquitted. The court found him guilty only of being stupid, not of criminal intent. Jeanne de la Motte was convicted, branded with a V for volus, thief, and imprisoned. She escaped prison and fled to London, where she published memoirs claiming that Marie Antoinette had indeed received the diamonds, and that Jeanne was a victim of royal injustice. The affair of the diamond necklace destroyed what little remained of Marie Antoinette's reputation. The French people never forgave her. Whether she was innocent became irrelevant. The scandal contributed directly to the revolutionary fervour that would consume France just 4 years later. Marie Antoinette would die on the guillotine in 1793, and historians agree that the diamond necklace affair was one of the critical factors that turned public opinion against her. Cagliostro, expelled from France, continued travelling. But his reputation was damaged. The trial had exposed details about his past. Newspapers identified him as Giuseppe Balsamo from Palermo. His claims of ancient nobility were revealed as fabrications. His mystical persona looked less convincing when contrasted with evidence that he was a Sicilian con artist. He went to Rome. This was a mistake. The Papal States in the 1780s were not tolerant of Masonic activity. The Catholic Church had condemned Freemasonry as heretical Cagliostro's Egyptian rite, with its invocations of pre-Christian gods and its promise of spiritual powers outside church authority was particularly offensive to Vatican authorities. In December 1789, Cagliostro was arrested by the Roman Inquisition. He was charged with heresy, with practicing magic, with founding a Masonic lodge on papal territory. His wife Serafina testified against him, either coerced or genuinely betraying him to save herself. The trial was secret, the evidence was sealed, but the verdict was predetermined. In April 1791, Cagliostro was convicted and sentenced to death. Pope Pius VI commuted the sentence to life imprisonment, possibly because executing such a famous figure would create martyrdom, possibly out of genuine mercy. Cagliostro was imprisoned in the fortress of San Leo in the Apennine Mountains. This was not a normal prison. Sanleo was built on a massive rock formation, accessible only by a single narrow path. The fortress had been used for centuries to hold prisoners who needed to be isolated completely from the outside world. Political prisoners, religious heretics, men who were too dangerous to execute, but too problematic to release. Cagliostro was placed in a cell called the pozzetto, the little well. It was a small chamber carved into rock, no window, no natural light. The only entrance was through a trapdoor in the ceiling, through which food was lowered on ropes. The prisoner could not stand fully upright. He could not lie down completely flat. He could only crouch or sit in perpetual discomfort. This was where Count Alessandro di Cagliostro, who claimed to be 2,000 years old, who claimed to possess the elixir of life, who had charmed European aristocracy and founded Masonic lodges and treated the sick and performed miracles, spent his final years. The official records state that he died on August 26, 1795, after 4 years in the pozzetto. The cause of death was listed as apoplexy, a stroke. He was 52 years old, according to his birth year as Giuseppe Balsamo. But his body was never returned to his family. No grave was marked. The official records are suspiciously vague about burial details, and almost immediately, rumors began that Cagliostro had not died, that his death was staged, that he had somehow escaped, that he had used his alchemical knowledge to fake death and secure release from the pozzetto. These rumors were almost certainly false. The pozzetto was inescapable. The fortress was impregnable. And Cagliostro's health, after 4 years of such brutal imprisonment, would have been destroyed. A man who could barely stand or lie down properly, who lived in darkness without fresh air, who was given minimal food, would not survive long after release, even if escape were somehow possible. But the legend refuses to die. Throughout the 1800s and into the 1900s, people reported seeing Cagliostro. He appeared at seances. He communicated through mediums. He was spotted in various European cities, always looking the same age he had appeared in the 1780s. The Theosophical Society adopted him as one of their ascended masters, claiming he had transcended physical death and continued to guide humanity from spiritual planes. Occultists invoked his name in rituals. Books were published, claiming to reveal his secret teachings. So what is the truth about Cagliostro? Was he a charlatan? Certainly. Giuseppe Balsamo was a con artist. He fabricated his noble identity. He lied about his age. He deceived people for profit. These facts are documented. But was he only a charlatan? The evidence suggests something more complex. Cagliostro possessed genuine medical knowledge. His treatments worked often enough that his reputation as a healer cannot be dismissed as pure fraud. He may have learned folk medicine in Sicily. He may have studied with physicians during his travels. He may have been an intuitive genius at diagnosing psychosomatic illness. Whatever the source, he could heal people, and he used this ability. He also seems to have genuinely believed in alchemy and Masonic mysticism. Con artists don't usually end their lives imprisoned by the Inquisition for refusing to recant their beliefs. Cagliostro could have confessed, could have admitted fraud, could have saved himself. Instead, he maintained his claims even when doing so meant permanent imprisonment. This suggests authentic belief, not mere performance. The most likely truth is that Cagliostro was both. A fraud who genuinely believed in the spiritual systems he taught, a con artist who successfully convinced himself of his own deceptions. A man who started by lying to others and ended by believing his own lies. This makes him more tragic than if he was simply a charlatan. Because Cagliostro died in the worst possible prison, in complete darkness, in a cell designed to break the spirit of anyone confined within it. He died claiming to be immortal, claiming to possess the elixir of life, claiming powers that should have allowed him to escape or to endure or at least to die with dignity. Instead, he died like any ordinary man. 52 years old, broken by imprisonment, abandoned by everyone. His wife had betrayed him, his followers had forgotten him, his claims of immortality were proven false by the simple reality of his death. The fortress of San Leo still stands. You can visit it. You can see the Pozzetto, though it's no longer used as a cell tour. Guides will tell you about Cagliostro, about the famous prisoner who claimed to be immortal, about how he died in darkness believing himself eternal. And sometimes guides report visitors feel something in that cell, a presence, a cold spot that shouldn't exist in summer, a sense of profound sadness, as if something of Cagliostro remained behind, trapped not by stone walls, but by the weight of broken promises, of failed alchemy, of immortality that never materialized. Whether Cagliostro's spirit lingers or not, his legend certainly does. He remains one of history's most fascinating figures, precisely because we cannot reduce him to a simple category. He was not just a fraud, not just a believer, not just a healer, not just a con artist. He was all of these simultaneously. A man of genuine gifts who used them for deception. A liar who believed his own lies. A seeker of immortality who died in the worst possible way. The diamond necklace affair destroyed more than just Marie Antoinette's reputation. It exposed the rot at the heart of French aristocracy. It revealed how easily the powerful could be deceived. It demonstrated that mysticism and reason existed in uncomfortable tension throughout the Enlightenment, and it showed that the quest for immortality, for transcendence, for powers beyond human limitation, could be weaponized, could be used to manipulate, could contribute to the collapse of an entire social order. Cagliostro did not cause the French Revolution, but he was part of the constellation of scandals, deceptions, and failures of judgment that made revolution inevitable. His story is a cautionary tale about ambition, about self-deception, about the dangers of believing that ancient wisdom can shortcut human limitations. And yet, part of us wants to believe, wants to imagine that Cagliostro really did possess the elixir, that he faked his death, that he walked out of San Leo and disappeared into history, living still, watching us discuss whether he was fraud or master, charlatan or immortal. Because if Cagliostro succeeded, if anyone ever succeeded in creating the Philosopher's Stone, in preparing the elixir of life, then perhaps we could too. Perhaps death is not inevitable. Perhaps the alchemists were right all along, and we simply haven't found the correct formula yet. This hope, this desperate human hope that death can be defeated, is what kept alchemy alive for centuries. It's what made aristocrats believe con artists. It's what drove brilliant minds to waste fortunes and lives seeking transmutation. It's what makes us still tell these stories, still investigate these legends, still wonder whether maybe, just maybe, someone somewhere achieved the impossible. Cagliostro died in 1795 in the Pozzetto of San Leo. That is historical fact. But Cagliostro lives in legend, in rumor, in the persistent belief that he might have escaped, might have succeeded, might still walk among us. And perhaps that is the only immortality that alchemy ever truly offered. Not eternal life, but eternal legend. Not escape from death, but escape from being forgotten. Not the elixir of life, but the elixir of fame that keeps dead men's names alive centuries after their bodies turn to dust. We leave the darkness of San Leo now, ascending from the Pozzetto, where Cagliostro died, or escaped, or transcended, or simply ended. We travel backward in time to the 16th century, to Florence and Paris, to royal courts where another alchemist wielded power not through claims of immortality, but through very real political influence, where an Italian queen brought occult practices to France, where Catherine de' Medici consulted with astrologers and magicians to secure her family's grip on the throne, where the line between statecraft and sorcery blurred completely, where alchemy served not personal immortality, but dynastic ambition, and where the darkest arts were employed not for spiritual enlightenment, but for pure political survival. Chapter 4. Catherine de' Medici, the Queen who poisoned France. In 1533, a 14-year-old Italian girl arrived in France to marry the second son of King Francis I. Her name was Caterina Maria Romola di Lorenzo de' Medici. She was short, plain-faced, and considered an unsuitable match for French royalty. The Medici family was wealthy. They were bankers, the richest family in Florence, but they were not royal. They were merchants who had bought their way into nobility. French aristocrats looked down on her. They called her the merchant's daughter as an insult. Catherine brought with her a substantial dowry. She brought political connections to Italian city-states. She brought the promise of Medici financial support for French military campaigns. But she also brought something else, something that French courtiers did not expect and could not initially recognize. She brought knowledge, dark knowledge, occult practices that had been perfected in Renaissance Italy, where alchemy and astrology were not merely superstitions, but sophisticated systems practiced by the most educated minds. She brought recipes for poisons that killed slowly and untraceably. She brought connections to magicians and astrologers whom she had consulted since childhood. She brought the willingness to use any method, no matter how dark, to protect her power and her children. Catherine de' Medici would become the most powerful woman in France. She would rule as Queen Mother for 30 years, controlling 3 successive kings who were her sons. She would make decisions that shaped European politics for generations. And she would do all of this while maintaining a hidden court of occultists, alchemists, and poisoners who served her ambitions with methods that the Catholic Church officially condemned, but which Catherine employed without hesitation. The early years of her marriage were not promising. Her husband, Henri, Duke of Orléans, was in love with another woman, Diane de Poitiers, 20 years older than Henri, but beautiful, sophisticated, and everything Catherine was not Henri ignored Catherine almost completely. For 10 years, their marriage produced no children, and in a royal marriage, children were the only thing that mattered. Catherine was desperate. Without an heir, she was worthless. She could be set aside, divorced, sent back to Italy in disgrace. She needed to become pregnant. She consulted physicians. They provided medical advice that didn't work. She consulted priests. They prayed for her, but God apparently wasn't listening. So Catherine turned to other sources. Sources that the church would not approve. Sources that her Italian family had taught her to trust when conventional methods failed. She consulted astrologers who cast horoscopes and told her when conditions were favorable for conception. She drank herbal preparations created by alchemists who claimed to enhance fertility. She performed rituals in private chambers that combined Christian prayer with older, pre-Christian practices. She tried everything, desperate, willing to risk her soul if it meant producing an heir. In 1544, 11 years into her marriage, Catherine finally became pregnant. She gave birth to a son, Francis. Over the next 13 years, she bore 9 more children, 10 children total, after a decade of barrenness. This was unusual enough that rumors spread immediately about what Catherine had done to suddenly become fertile. Had she made deals with dark forces? Had her alchemists provided substances that worked through unnatural means? Had she sold something in exchange for fertility? Catherine never explained. She simply smiled and bore her children and consolidated her power. In 1547, King Francis I died, and Henri became King Henri II. Catherine was now Queen of France, but she was not yet powerful. Henri still preferred Diane de Poitiers, giving her influence that should have belonged to Catherine. Diane attended council meetings. She advised Henri on policy. She received estates and titles. Catherine endured this humiliation in silence, waiting. In 1559, Henri died in a jousting accident. A splinter from a broken lance pierced his eye and entered his brain. He suffered for 10 days before dying. Catherine was 40 years old. She had been queen for 12 years, but had wielded little real power. Now everything changed. Her eldest son, Francis, became King Francis II at age 15. He was sickly, physically weak, dominated by his wife Mary, Queen of Scots, and her uncles from the powerful Guise family. Catherine maneuvered carefully, establishing herself as the true power behind the throne, while allowing others to think they were in control. Francis II died in December 1560 after reigning only 17 months. He suffered from an ear infection that spread to his brain. Some historians suspect poisoning, though evidence is circumstantial. Catherine had motive. Francis was controllable by the Guises, not by her. With Francis dead, her second son, Charles, became king. Charles IX was 10 years old when he became king. For the next 14 years, Catherine ruled France as regent and queen mother. Charles was intelligent but weak-willed, easily influenced, prone to emotional outbursts. Catherine controlled him completely. Every major decision went through her. She negotiated with foreign powers. She managed religious conflicts between Catholics and Huguenots. She arranged political marriages. She was the de facto ruler of France. And during these years, Catherine assembled her shadow court. The most famous member was Nostradamus, whom we will discuss in detail later. Catherine consulted him regularly on matters of state and family. But Nostradamus was merely the most public of her occult advisors. There was Cosimo Ruggieri, an Italian astrologer and alchemist who had followed Catherine from Florence. Ruggieri lived in Paris, consulting for Catherine on matters she could not discuss with conventional advisors. He cast horoscopes for her children. He performed divination rituals to predict political events. And according to persistent rumors, he prepared poisons for Catherine's use. There was Laurent de Médicis, no relation, a perfumer whose shop on the Pont Saint-Michel became legendary as a front for poison sales. The shop sold perfumes, cosmetics, and beauty products. But in back rooms, Laurent allegedly prepared arsenic compounds, mercury solutions, and herbal toxins that killed slowly enough to appear as natural illness. Whether Catherine commissioned these poisons is disputed. That she had access to them is not. There were others, magicians whose names were never recorded in official documents, but who appear in letters and memoirs of the period. Men and women who performed rituals in Catherine's private chambers, who invoked spirits to provide political intelligence, who created talismans that Catherine wore beneath her clothing, who prepared substances that Catherine allegedly used to control those around her. The most infamous incident occurred in 1572. The St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. Religious tension between Catholics and Huguenots, French Protestants, had been building for years. Catherine had attempted to balance the factions, but events were spiraling towards civil war. In August 1572, Huguenot leaders gathered in Paris for the wedding of Henri of Navarre, a Protestant, to Catherine's daughter Marguerite, a Catholic. This marriage was supposed to reconcile the factions. Instead, it created an opportunity for massacre. On August 24th, 1572, Catholic forces began systematically murdering Huguenots in Paris. The killing lasted for several days and spread to other French cities. Estimates vary, but at least 5,000 to 10,000 Huguenots were killed. Catherine's role in ordering the massacre is debated by historians. She claimed afterward that it was necessary to prevent a Huguenot coup. Critics said she planned it deliberately to eliminate Protestant leadership. The truth probably lies between. Catherine likely did not plan a massacre of this scale, but once it began, she allowed it to continue because it served her political purposes. Some accounts claim Catherine consulted with Ruggieri before the massacre, that he performed divination rituals predicting the outcome, that he told her the stars favored decisive action. Whether these consultations occurred or were invented later by Catherine's enemies to make her seem even more monstrous is unknown. What is known is that the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre horrified Europe. It confirmed Protestant fears about Catholic cruelty. It damaged France's international reputation, and it stained Catherine's legacy permanently. She would never escape association with the massacre, regardless of her actual level of responsibility. Charles IX died in 1574, possibly from tuberculosis, possibly from guilt over the massacre. Catherine's third son became King Henri III. He was 33 years old, intelligent, capable, but eccentric and increasingly unpopular. He relied heavily on Catherine's advice, continuing her influence over French politics. During Henri III's reign, Catherine continued consulting her occult advisors. She became increasingly interested in alchemy, not for personal immortality, but for political advantage. If her alchemists could create gold through transmutation, France could fund its wars without crushing taxation. If they could create elixirs that enhanced health and longevity, her son could outlive his enemies. Alchemy offered solutions to political problems that conventional statecraft could not provide. She funded alchemical laboratories in Paris. She brought Italian alchemists to France, offering them patronage in exchange for their knowledge. She collected alchemical texts and had them translated from Arabic and Latin into French. She learned some alchemical processes herself, conducting experiments in private chambers. Did Catherine believe alchemy worked? Or did she simply use it as another tool of statecraft, allowing rumors of alchemical power to enhance her mystique? The answer is probably both. Catherine was ruthlessly practical. She used whatever methods achieved results. If astrology provided useful intelligence, she used astrology. If poisons eliminated threats, she used poisons. If alchemical experiments occasionally produced useful substances, she funded more experiments, but she was also a woman of her era. Renaissance Europe believed in astrology, in alchemy, in the reality of occult forces. Catherine's consultations with Nostradamus and Ruggieri were not seen as unusual or superstitious, but as sensible uses of available knowledge systems. Every European monarch consulted astrologers. Catherine simply did so more systematically than most. Catherine de' Medici died on January 5, 1589, at age 69. She had survived 8 French kings: Francis I, her father-in-law, Henri II, her husband, Francis II, her eldest son, Charles IX, her second son, and Henri III, her third son, plus 3 kings who reigned before her arrival in France. She had ruled France in practice, if not in name, for nearly 30 years. Her legacy is complex and contested. She was brilliant, ruthless, and absolutely committed to preserving her family's power. She navigated religious wars, foreign invasions, and court intrigues with remarkable skill. She kept France intact during its most dangerous period of internal conflict, but she was also associated with massacre, with poisoning, with dark practices that shocked even her contemporaries. Whether she actually used poisons as extensively as rumor claimed is debatable. Whether her occult consultations influenced major political decisions is uncertain. But the rumors themselves became part of her legend, making her seem more sinister than she may actually have been. The house where Laurent the perfumer sold his poisons no longer stands. The laboratories where Catherine's alchemists worked have been demolished or converted to other uses. But buildings that Catherine patronized still exist across Paris. Churches she funded, palaces she inhabited, The Tuileries Palace, which Catherine designed and built, stood until 1871, when it was destroyed during the Paris Commune. And in some of these surviving buildings, staff report phenomena that suggest Catherine's presence lingers. In the Hôtel de la Reine, now part of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, where Catherine lived during her regency, security guards report seeing a woman in 16th century clothing walking corridors late at night. She wears black. Catherine wore mourning clothes for 30 years after Henri II's death. She moves silently. When guards approach, she vanishes. In the Château de Chaumont-on-the-Loire, where Catherine supposedly conducted magical rituals with Ruggieri, visitors report cold spots in specific chambers, the smell of sulfur and burning herbs with no source, shadows that move against light patterns in ways that suggest human figures. Are these genuine hauntings, or are they psychological projections, visitors experiencing what they expect to experience in locations associated with Catherine's dark reputation? What cannot be disputed is that Catherine de' Medici brought Italian occult practices to France. She normalized the royal consultation of astrologers and alchemists. She demonstrated that power could be pursued through any means available, that morality was negotiable, that the Queen's primary duty was survival of the dynasty regardless of cost. She was not seeking personal immortality through alchemy. She was seeking something perhaps more valuable, political immortality, the survival of the Medici line on the French throne, the perpetuation of her influence across generations. She failed. Her 3 sons died without legitimate heirs. The Valois dynasty ended with Henri III's assassination in 1589. The French throne passed to Henri of Navarre, who became Henri IV, founding the Bourbon dynasty. Catherine's direct line ended. Her genetic legacy was erased from French royalty, but her political legacy endured. The centralized French monarchy that she strengthened would survive until the Revolution. The model of the powerful Queen Mother advising young kings would be repeated, and the association of French royalty with occult practices would continue, whispered about in court gossip, investigated by later historians. Never quite proven, but never quite dispelled, Catherine de' Medici was not an alchemist seeking the philosopher's stone. She was a political operator who used alchemy and astrology as tools of statecraft. She was not trying to create gold from lead. She was trying to create a dynasty from her children, to transmute political weakness into strength, to achieve through will and intelligence and ruthless action what birth and circumstance had denied her. In that, she succeeded more than any alchemist who sought mere gold. She shaped European history. She preserved France during its greatest crisis. She proved that a foreign-born merchant's daughter could become the most powerful person in Europe through sheer force of will. Whether she used poisons, whether her alchemists provided useful substances, whether her astrologers predicted events accurately, these questions miss the larger point. Catherine de' Medici succeeded because she understood power in all its forms. She used every tool available. She believed in nothing so completely that it limited her options. And she achieved what she set out to achieve. Her sons reigned, France survived. Her name endured. And in the darkness of Parisian nights, in buildings she once inhabited, perhaps something of her remains, not seeking immortality. She had no interest in living forever, but watching, observing, ensuring that her memory is not sanitized, not forgotten, not reduced to comfortable historical narrative. Catherine de' Medici was dangerous. She was brilliant. She was ruthless. And France would not have survived without her. We leave the 16th century now. Catherine's France, where politics and alchemy intertwined inextricably. We jump forward to the 20th century, to Belle Époque Paris, to a time when alchemy should have been dead, replaced by modern chemistry and scientific method. But alchemy never truly died. It simply went underground. And in the 1920s, a mysterious alchemist published books revealing ancient secrets, demonstrated his mastery to select witnesses, and then vanished completely, leaving behind only his name and a mystery that remains unsolved 90 years later. Fulcanelli. The last alchemist. The man who may have achieved the great work. The one who disappeared at the moment of his triumph. Or his death. Or his transcendence. Chapter 5. Fulcanelli, the alchemist who vanished. In 1926, 2 books appeared in Parisian bookshops that would transform 20th century alchemy: Le Mystère des Cathédrales, The Mystery of the Cathedrals, and Les Demeures Philosophales, Dwellings of the Philosophers. Both were studies of medieval alchemical symbolism encoded in Gothic architecture. Both demonstrated extraordinary erudition, combining deep knowledge of medieval history, architecture, chemistry, linguistics, and esoteric traditions. Both were written by an author who used the pseudonym Fulcanelli. No one knew who Fulcanelli actually was. The books were published through the efforts of Eugène Cancellier, a young man in his 20s who claimed to be Fulcanelli's student. Cancellier provided the manuscripts to publishers. He corrected proofs. He wrote prefaces explaining that his master Fulcanelli preferred to remain anonymous, that revealing alchemical secrets required discretion, that the modern world was not ready to know the author's true identity. This was not unusual in alchemical circles. Many alchemical texts had been published under pseudonyms across centuries. Anonymity protected practitioners from persecution, from charlatans seeking to steal their knowledge, from the attention of those who would use alchemical discoveries for destructive purposes. But Fulcanelli's anonymity was more absolute than most. He did not simply hide his name. He seemed to have erased his entire identity. No records connected any historical person to the Fulcanelli manuscripts. No paper trail led to a real human being. Fulcanelli appeared from nowhere, published 2 masterworks, and then vanished. The books themselves were extraordinary. The Mystery of the Cathedrals analysed Notre Dame de Paris and other Gothic cathedrals, arguing that their architectural features encoded alchemical formulas. The gargoyles were not mere decorations, but symbols representing stages of the great work. The rose windows depicted the philosopher's stone. The proportions of columns and arches contained mathematical ratios necessary for successful transmutation. Fulcanelli wrote with precision that suggested first-hand knowledge. He did not speculate about symbolism. He explained it with the confidence of someone who had successfully performed the processes the symbols represented. He described the colors that appear during alchemical operations, colors that can only be observed by someone who has actually conducted the experiments. He provided details that could not be learned from books, but only from practical laboratory work. Les Demeures Philosophales expanded the analysis to alchemical symbolism in mansions and estates across France. Fulcanelli identified alchemical symbols carved into buildings, painted on walls, embedded in architectural designs. He demonstrated that wealthy patrons in previous centuries had commissioned buildings that were essentially 3-dimensional alchemical textbooks, preserving knowledge in stone that could survive persecution and book burning. The level of scholarship was astonishing. Fulcanelli quoted medieval Latin texts. He referenced obscure Arabic alchemical works. He demonstrated knowledge of Greek, Hebrew, and ancient Egyptian. He discussed Gothic architecture with expertise that suggested formal training. He wrote about chemistry with understanding that indicated serious laboratory experience. Who was this man? Eugène Cancellier, his student, refused to reveal his identity. Cancellier claimed that Fulcanelli had sworn him to secrecy, that revealing his master's name would betray a sacred trust, that Fulcanelli had reasons for anonymity that Cancellier must respect. But Cancellier did provide some information, perhaps more than Fulcanelli would have wanted. He said that Fulcanelli had successfully achieved the great work that he had created the Philosopher's Stone, that he had transmuted lead into gold in Cancelliet's presence, in a laboratory in Paris, in the early 1920s. According to Cancelliet's account, Fulcanelli invited him to a laboratory in Marseille in 1922. There, using a small quantity of a mysterious red powder, Fulcanelli transformed approximately 100 grams of lead into gold. Cancelliet witnessed the transmutation personally. He described the process in detail. The heating, the color changes, the final product that was tested and verified as genuine gold. Cancelliet claimed that Fulcanelli then told him the work was complete, that he had achieved what he set out to achieve. That he was leaving where he was going, Fulcanelli would not say. When he might return, he did not know. He gave Cancelliet the manuscripts for his 2 books, instructed him to have them published, and told him to continue studying, but to reveal nothing about Fulcanelli's true identity. Then Fulcanelli disappeared. Cancelliet claimed he never saw his master again, that Fulcanelli vanished completely, that all attempts to locate him failed, that even Cancelliet did not know whether Fulcanelli was alive or dead, in France or abroad, living under another identity, or having achieved alchemical transcendence. But Cancelliet did provide one more detail years later, that deepened the mystery. He claimed that in 1954, 28 years after Fulcanelli's disappearance, he was contacted by a mysterious figure who arranged a meeting. Cancelliet traveled to a location in Spain. He refused to specify where. There,